My daughter-in-law stood in the middle of the living room and said to me, "You need to remember, this is not your house. You are just a guest here." Her words hit me harder than any illness or hardship I had ever faced. I looked at my son, hoping he would speak up, but he kept his eyes on the floor. In that moment, I quietly made a decision that would change everything. They had no idea the deed to this house was still in my name, and they were about to learn the truth in a way they would never forget. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from right now. It helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. My name is Samuel Grant, and I am 72 years old. After losing my wife Helen to a sudden stroke 2 years ago, I found myself in a quiet house, filled with memories that made it hard to breathe. My son Michael and his wife Vanessa invited me to move in with them. They said it would be good for all of us, and that Lily, my 12-year-old granddaughter, would love having me around. I thought this was an answer to prayer. I believed I was stepping into a warm, loving home where I would spend the rest of my days surrounded by family. The first few weeks felt peaceful. I woke up early, made breakfast for the family, and packed Lily's school lunch with a note that said, "I love you, kiddo. Make today great." At night, I told her stories about her grandmother and how we met in college. Vanessa smiled politely when others were around and called me Dad in front of neighbors. But inside the house, her tone slowly changed. It started with small comments. She said things like, "We have a different way of folding laundry here," or "Please do not move things around in the kitchen." I tried to adjust and stay respectful. I never wanted to be a burden. Michael worked long hours and often came home tired, so I avoided bringing up any tension. I convinced myself it was just part of adjusting to a shared home. But the tone shifted from polite correction to quiet rejection. One after I heard Vanessa talking on the phone in the next room. She said, "It is not our job to take care of him forever. This is our house now, and he needs to understand that." I stood frozen in the hallway with a cup of tea in my hand. She did not know I was there. For the first time, I felt unwanted in the place I helped pay for and trusted them to cherish. I tried to brush it off and focus on the good moments. Lily would run into my room after school and show me her drawings. She always said, "Grandpa, this house feels better when you are here." Her words warmed my heart, but they also reminded me that this house was meant to be a home, not a battlefield of pride and power. Then came the night everything changed. We were sitting at the dinner table when Vanessa turned to me and said, "I need you to stop telling Lily what to do. She has parents, and this is not your home to make decisions in." I looked at Michael. He took a slow breath and said nothing. I replied calmly, "I did not make a decision. I only told her to finish her homework before watching television." Vanessa put down her fork and said, "You are overstepping. You need to remember you are just a guest here." The words hung in the air. Guest. In the house I had trusted them with, in the home that still legally belonged to me. I did not show anger. I did not argue. In that moment, pain turned into clarity. I finally understood this was not just disrespect. It was a betrayal of trust. That night, I made a quiet plan, not for revenge, but for dignity. What they did not know was that I never signed over the house to them. I had placed it in a living trust with my name as the sole owner. They thought it was theirs. They had no idea what was coming. From the moment Vanessa called me a guest in my own house, the air inside those walls changed. It was as if every breath I took reminded her that I was still there, still existing, still a presence she did not want. The next morning, I woke up before everyone else as usual, prepared coffee, and set the table. When Vanessa entered the kitchen, she didn't say good morning. Instead, she opened the cabinet, took out the plates I had set, and moved them to another spot on the table. I asked if something was wrong. She didn't look at me when she answered. She said, "I prefer the setting done like this. Please don't set the table again unless I ask." Her tone wasn't angry, but it was cold, the kind of cold that freezes a man's pride. I nodded and stepped back. It hurt, but I stayed quiet, believing it was best not to create tension. Throughout the next several days, Vanessa began to take control of every inch of the house. She reorganized the pantry, the refrigerator, even my bedroom closet without asking. One afternoon, I came back from a walk to find 2 of my suitcases on the hallway floor. Vanessa stood nearby with her arms crossed. She said, "I moved some of your things to the garage so we could convert your room into a guest space. We need that room for when Michael's business associates come over." I stared at the suitcases, then back at her, wondering if she even realized what she was saying. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked. She shrugged and replied, "There's a cot in the garage. We have a heater there. It's temporary." There was no apology, no empathy, not even the courtesy to pretend this decision involved me. It was a declaration. I was no longer seen as part of the family unit, but as a temporary inconvenience they were tolerating. That night, when Michael came home, I asked if we could talk privately. We sat in his office where he kept his awards, photographs, and shelves full of books he hadn't touched in years. I told him what had happened. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and rubbed his forehead. He didn't look surprised. Instead, he looked tired. "Dad," he said softly, "Vanessa just wants order in the house. She means well." I could feel my heart tighten at his words. He was too afraid to stand up to her. Rather than protecting me, his own father, he was protecting his comfort. I asked him one simple question. "Do you believe I belong here?" He looked down and said, "Of course you do." But then he added, "We just need to respect boundaries." Boundaries. That was his word for it. That was the line he had chosen, not to defend me, but to balance between me and the woman who wanted me gone. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water and heard Vanessa speaking to someone on speakerphone. Her voice was sharp and agitated. She said, "I told Michael we need to speed this up. He can't stay here forever. We need to start looking at senior care facilities. This is our home now, not his." The person on the phone asked if Michael agreed. She replied, "He will. He always does." My hand tightened around the glass in silence. I realized this wasn't about discomfort or boundaries anymore. They were planning to remove me completely, not only from the house, but from their lives. Later that day, I was sitting in the living room reading when Lily returned from school. She dropped her backpack, ran over to me, and hugged me tightly. She said, "Grandpa, are you still going to be here for my piano recital next month?" Her eyes were full of excitement. That question broke me inside. I didn't want her to feel the pain of abandonment. I promised her I wouldn't miss it. Vanessa walked in just in time to hear that and said, "We'll see what happens." Lily looked confused and asked, "What do you mean?" Vanessa forced a smile and said, "We might be making some changes around here." Lily turned back to me, worry in her eyes. I reassured her with a smile, even though I had no idea what would happen next. That evening at dinner, the tension finally broke. Vanessa set a plate in front of me without saying a word. We all sat silently till she put down her fork and said, "Samuel, I've spoken to Michael, and we both feel it's time you start considering your next living arrangement." I looked up calmly. "What arrangement is that?" She replied, "A senior residence. You'll have your own space, meals, medical care, people your own age. It's better for everyone." I glanced at Michael. He didn't look at me. He kept eating as if nothing was happening. I set my fork down. "This is my," I said. Vanessa leaned back and said firmly, "No, Samuel. This is our home. You are a guest here. Guests don't stay forever." The room fell silent. Lily excused herself, tears in her eyes. In that moment, I felt something inside me shift. I was not angry. I was disappointed. Disappointed in my son who had lost his voice, disappointed in my daughter-in-law who had lost her humility, and disappointed that my kindness had been mistaken for weakness. That night, I packed my belongings, not out of defeat, but because I had rediscovered something I had forgotten. I wasn't just a guest. I was the owner, and they were about to learn the difference. That night, as the house settled into silence, I sat on the edge of the cot in the garage with my small suitcase beside me, and I stared at the concrete floor, thinking about every sacrifice I had made over the years. I thought about the land my father left me, the land I had sold to help Michael buy this house when he and Vanessa were struggling with debt. At the time, they had called me their savior, the backbone of the family, and Michael promised it would always be my home as long as I lived. Now, I was sleeping next to lawn equipment and old paint cans in a cold garage, with the faint sound of the family I raised eating dessert in the house I owned. But instead of anger, what I felt was clarity. I realized that my silence had allowed disrespect to grow. By trying to avoid conflict and keep peace, I had unintentionally handed away my dignity. That night, I made a choice. I would not yell, argue, or demand respect. I would act with quiet strength. I took out an old envelope from my briefcase containing the original house trust agreement. My late wife Helen had insisted we keep everything in our names until both of us passed. She had seen something in Vanessa early on, a hunger for control. At the time, I thought she was being too cautious. Now I understood she had been protecting our legacy. At 6 in the morning, before anyone woke, I left the house and walked 3 blocks to a small coffee shop. I dialed the number of Mr. Andrew Patterson, my attorney for over 30 years, and a man I trusted with my life. When he heard my voice, he immediately knew something was wrong. I explained the situation in a calm, steady voice, and he responded, "Samuel, it is time we activate your legal rights. You still retain full ownership under the living trust. You have the right to reclaim the property or set terms of occupancy." His words gave me strength, not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally felt seen. He told me to meet him at his office to draft a formal notice. As I sat in his office, surrounded by shelves full of legal books and framed certificates, I signed papers that would change the course of my family's life. Mr. Patterson explained that the house was never transferred to Michael or Vanessa. It was loaned to them under a trust agreement, with the condition of respectful cohabitation. That condition had been violated. I was legally entitled to remove them or set new terms. I asked Mr. Patterson not to remove them immediately. I didn't want to tear Lily's life apart. Instead, I wanted to give them one chance to make things right. We prepared a notice of trust activation and a mandatory meeting at the house in 2 weeks. I returned home later that day and found Vanessa in the kitchen. She didn't ask where I had been. Instead, she said, "We need your cot out of the way. The garage is cluttered." I looked at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Calm, certain, unshaken. "Thank you for letting me know," I replied, and walked past her. That night, for the first time since my wife's death, I slept peacefully, not because things were fixed, but because I had decided not to let anyone diminish who I was. Over the next 2 weeks, I stayed quiet. I went about my day normally. I made Lily breakfast, watered the garden, and even repaired a broken fence panel. Vanessa seemed confused by my calmness. She had expected me to break down or leave in shame. What she didn't realize was that every day that passed brought us closer to the moment the truth would rise. Michael avoided eye contact with me, sensing something had changed, but not knowing what. Lily remained by my side, asking if I was okay. I told her gently, "Sometimes people forget what matters, but life has a way of reminding them." Finally, the day of the meeting came. Mr. Patterson arrived in a dark suit, carrying a briefcase. He didn't knock. He walked in through the front door as if he owned the place, because in a way, he represented the man who did. Vanessa rushed into the living room, looking angry and confused. "Who is this?" she demanded. Mr. Patterson calmly replied, "I am here on behalf of the homeowner, Mr. Samuel Grant. We have important legal matters to discuss." Michael's face turned pale. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time in years. I remained seated, steady, prepared. This was no longer about comfort or inconvenience. This was about restoring truth, dignity, and order. In that moment, I knew the turning point had come, not through shouting or revenge, but through quiet strength backed by truth and law. The house would no longer be ruled by pride. It was time for accountability. Michael and Vanessa sat on the living room couch as Mr. Patterson opened his briefcase and placed a stack of documents neatly on the coffee table. The tension in the air was heavy, and for the first time, Vanessa didn't have a confident expression on her face. She crossed her arms, trying to appear composed, but I could see the nervous tapping of her foot. Michael looked at me with eyes full of confusion and fear, already sensing that this conversation would not be in his favor. Mr. Patterson began with a steady voice, saying, "This meeting is not a request. It is a legal requirement. We are here to discuss the activation of the Whitford Living Trust, established by Mr. Samuel Grant and his late wife, Helen Grant. Vanessa interrupted sharply. "What does this have to do with our house?" Mr. Patterson didn't flinch. "This is not your house. This property is legally owned by Mr. Samuel Grant, and it has been since the day it was purchased." The room went silent. I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, each second echoing the truth that was finally surfacing. Michael stared at the documents as if he were seeing a ghost from his past. Vanessa laughed in disbelief, shaking her head. "That's impossible. Our names are on everything. The mortgage, the bills, the insurance." Mr. Patterson calmly slid a document toward her. "Actually, you have been residing here under trust occupancy. The trust covered all payments, including taxes and insurance. You have not made a single ownership payment." Vanessa snatched up the papers, flipping through them with trembling hands. Her face drained of color as she realized the signatures on every document were mine and my late wife's. Her voice cracked as she said, "So what are you saying? He can just walk in here and take everything from us?" Mr. Patterson replied, "He doesn't have to walk in and take anything. This home has always belonged to him. You are the ones who have been living here by his permission." The truth settled like a storm cloud that had finally burst. Michael looked at me, eyes filled with guilt and disbelief. "Dad," he whispered, "why didn't you tell us?" I took a deep breath, my voice calm but heavy with emotion. "Because I never wanted to use this house as power over you. I gave you a home so you could build a family. I never wanted you to feel like you were living under my shadow. But instead of being thankful, you both began treating me like an outsider." Vanessa stood up quickly, anger mixed with humiliation. "So what now? Are you kicking us out? Is that your plan, to throw your own family on the street?" I looked at her, and instead of seeing the confident daughter-in-law who always had control, I saw someone who had finally met the weight of her own actions. "I do not want to destroy this family," I said. "I want to fix it, but respect must be restored." Mr. Patterson then stated the legal terms. "You have two options. Option 1, vacate the property within 30 days. Option 2, remain in the home under new legal terms. Those terms require full acknowledgement of ownership, shared responsibility of household care for Mr. Grant, and written agreement of respectful conduct." Vanessa's lips parted in shock. "Respectful conduct? You want us to sign a contract promising to be nice?" Mr. Patterson responded without emotion. "This is not a suggestion. It is a legal agreement. If you violate it, eviction will proceed immediately." Michael buried his face in his hands. Tears formed in his eyes as he finally broke his silence. "Dad, I am so sorry. I let her push you out because I was trying to keep peace in my marriage. I didn't realize it was costing me integrity." I felt a wave of sadness for my son, not because of what had happened, but because of how lost he had become. "Michael," I said gently, "I never wanted you to choose between me and your wife. I only wanted you to choose what was right." Vanessa suddenly dropped to her knees in front of me. The pride that once drove her now shattered. Tears streamed down her face as she said, "I was wrong. I let this house make me feel powerful. I forgot that without you, none of this would exist. I hurt you, and I hurt Lily too." She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. The room was filled with a silence that was no longer tense, but healing. Lily, who had been quietly standing in the hallway the entire time, ran toward me and wrapped her arms around me. "Grandpa," she cried, "please don't leave us. Please stay. This house is home because you are here." I put my arms around her and felt the final wall inside me fall. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a story about losing a home. It was a story about losing respect, and finally regaining it, not through anger or revenge, but through truth and strength. I looked at Mr. Patterson and nodded. "They will stay, under the new agreement." Michael stood and hugged me, his voice shaking. "Thank you, Dad. I promise things will be different." Vanessa wiped her tears and nodded slowly in agreement. In that moment, justice was not about removing them. It was about restoring the honor that should never have been questioned. The house had walls and a roof, but today it got back its heart. In the days that followed the legal meeting, the atmosphere inside the house changed completely. It was not instant, and it was not perfect, but it was real. Vanessa no longer spoke to me with sharpness or control. She approached me differently, sometimes quiet, sometimes unsure, but always respectful. She started inviting me to sit at the dining table first, and asked for my opinions during conversations. I could see her struggling to balance her pride with her guilt, but I also saw something I had not seen in a long time: genuine effort. Michael, for the first time since I had moved in, stopped avoiding eye contact. He began spending more time at home, joining me on morning walks, asking questions about his mother, my late wife, and wanting to know things he had never taken the time to hear. One morning, as we sat on the porch watching the sunrise, he placed his hand over mine and said, "Dad, I forgot who I was supposed to be. I let my fear of conflict make me weak. I will never let that happen again." Those words weren't just an apology. They were a promise of a son returning to his rightful place. Lily, my beloved granddaughter, had tears of joy when she saw peace returning to her home. She began spending even more time with me, showing me her drawings, asking me to help with her homework, and every night before bed she would say, "Grandpa, I'm glad you're still here." The trust agreement enforced change, but it was not the paper that changed their hearts. It was the truth that finally came to light. For the first time, Vanessa openly admitted that the house had become a symbol of power for her. She told me one evening while helping me prepare dinner, "I grew up poor. I never had stability. When we got this house, I felt safe. But then I let that feeling turn into fear that someone could take it from me. I didn't realize I was pushing out the very person who made it possible." I did not respond with anger or pride. I simply said, "A house built on control will always feel threatened. A home built on gratitude will never fear losing anything." Slowly, the house shifted from a battlefield of unspoken resentment into a place where healing began to take root. Vanessa started including me in decisions. She even suggested turning the garage, where she had once moved my belongings, into a proper workshop where Lily and I could work on school projects together. Michael initiated weekly family dinners where each member could speak freely, and no one was allowed to dismiss or belittle the opinions of others. These changes were not small. They were signs that the true ownership of a house does not come from whose name is on the papers, but whose presence carries the wisdom to guide the family. On the day we officially signed the new agreement, Vanessa looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "This will always be your home. I hope one day you will see it as ours too, not by law, but by love." I accepted her words, not as a guarantee of perfection, but as evidence of transformation. In the months that followed, something remarkable happened. I began to feel joy again. The home was no longer a place of judgment, but a place of restoration. Respect was no longer demanded, but given freely. Michael became more attentive as a father and husband. Vanessa became more compassionate and supportive. Lily thrived in the new environment, and every evening we shared moments together that filled our home, not with silence or tension, but with laughter and peace. As I sat by the living room window one afternoon, watching Lily play outside, I reflected on everything that had happened. The greatest lesson I learned was not about ownership and control. It was about the silent strength that comes from knowing your worth. I realized that sometimes life will not defend your dignity for you. You must stand for it yourself, not with anger, not with violence, but with truth. Today, the house is still legally mine, but I no longer feel the need to hold that over anyone, because now it is more than a house. It is a home where love lives again. And if this story teaches anything, it is this: never let it make you feel like a guest in your own life. Stand firm in your value, speak truth with strength, and you might be surprised by how many hearts are waiting to change once they are shown the way. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to the channel and where you are watching from. I'd love to hear your thoughts and connect with you.